Could find our seats, we can get started. Thank you very much. I know. My wife, gave me a guilt trip. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jose Gonzalez, and I'm the Director of Government and Industry Relations for Walt Disney World. It is great to see people in an actual room, right? It's been a while since I've been in one of these, and so I'm actually excited, right, for an event like this. And this is going to be a fantastic event, so you will be very happy that you're here. I'm also a proud member of the board of the Seminole Chamber. That is a fantastic group of folks that I am very happy to be a part of. And we are delighted to have you join us today, and both in person. Again, thank you for coming out in person. But we also have a number of folks that are participating via Zoom. So we wanted to say hello to all the Zoomers that are watching us. And to begin our program, I would like for us to welcome Chairman Jay Zembauer to the stage, who will deliver our invocation and pledge this morning.
Good morning and welcome. If everybody would please bow their heads. Mighty God, hear our prayer and be in the midst of our meeting today. Thank you that your presence calms the troubled sea of life and speaks peace to our souls. Give us clear minds and peaceful hearts as we gather together today. For business leaders making difficult decisions that affect the lives of our employees, God, give these women and men wisdom to help them lead self-sacrificially. Father, we ask you watch over Task Force 4 as they assist with the rescue missions in the flooded areas of our friends in the Panhandle impacted by Hurricane Sally. Guide our elected officials with wisdom, strength, and courage as they execute their duties. Continue to watch over our first responders and our healthcare workers as they serve during these difficult times. Thank you, Father, for your continued blessings upon the citizens of Seminole County. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, amen. If you'll join me for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and justice for all.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd also like to thank all of our elected officials who are joining us today. So if you would please stand to be recognized for your leadership and everything that you do for our community. So if I can get some of our elected officials to stand. Thank you for being here. Let's also recognize our Seminole County Chamber board members who are in attendance today. If you are a board member, please stand to be recognized for your service. Excellent. At this time, I would like to give thanks to our presenting sponsor today, Central Florida Regional Hospital, as this event would not be possible without them. So please welcome their CEO, Trey Abshir, to the stage for some comments.
Thank you. Much like you, it's been quite some time since I've been at a crowd like this outside of the hospital. I'm sure you're all wanting to hear all things COVID, and trust me, that is the last topic that I want to talk about today, but I will mention a little bit about COVID, one of which, please take your mask with you. Nice CFR mask for you all to have. We've been wearing them 24/7, it seems like, at the hospital, but that will continue for some time, and we are better off for it. But Again, I'm Trey Apsher. I'm the CEO at Central Florida Regional Hospital, large hospital in Sanford, Florida. We've been around quite some time, 1982, second largest employer in Sanford. You probably know us all as a full-service cardiovascular hospital, as well as trauma. We opened up a freestanding emergency department almost 2 years ago in February, believe it or not. But we're really part of something bigger, and every time I get the opportunity to address a group like this, I always like to mention that story and that we're a part of something bigger in terms of HCA Healthcare. And it gets lost in this market at times, and we're certainly trying to do a better job at that aspect of it. But HCA Healthcare, largest healthcare provider in the United States, over 180 hospitals and growing, 280,000 employees that have been caring for the patients during a time like this. So we are extremely proud to be a part of such a company. And in Florida alone, there are close to 50 HCA hospitals. Between Texas and Florida, we make up half of the company. I think the last count was 11 trauma centers. I mentioned the 49 hospitals, a number of burn programs, GME. It's just an extremely important state and a market. And then nonetheless, and last but not least, in the Orlando market, outside of my facility, many of you know we're closely tied to Oviedo Medical Center, Osceola, and Point Siena, and the early part of next year, our latest addition, UCF Lake Nona Medical Center. So we have a broad reach and scale, and we're proud to be a part of such a great company. Now, shifting gears to COVID, I'll tell you a little bit about what's happening in the hospital today that was not happening in the early part of this year. We are universal masking, so if you've been to any hospitals, and I'm sure some of you have, you will see us wearing our mask throughout, and that's certainly the expectation. We are still limiting visitors at the facility, like most are, to ensure that our caregivers are as protected as possible. Temp screenings. You obviously received your temp screening here. We offer temp screening 24/7. So there is always someone checking your temp at 3 different locations at our facility, and we intend that to maintain. Probably the biggest change that we've seen during this time, rather than where we were sitting about 6 months ago, is we are not seeing the community come back to the hospital as they once did. So what we are seeing is those that are coming back to the hospital are sicker than they've ever been before. So I would implore you and ask you, for those that have family members that feel like, whether it's Central Florida Regional or any other hospital in the community, it is a safe environment. We will do anything possible to ensure that your loved one, yourself, is cared for to the utmost of our ability and keep them safe throughout. So please pass that message. I know many of us are feeling that, and when we are seeing those patients, they are at their worst time. So I highly encourage patients to come to the hospital as soon as possible. And then last but not least, and in closing, I did want to mention there have been a number of programs that HCA Healthcare has put into place during this COVID time to help many individuals within the hospital, outside the walls of the hospital. And I wanted to touch on one to ensure that you are all aware, what we call a pandemic pay program. So during this time of COVID, and I mentioned HCA employing 280,000 plus employees, I'm very happy to report that through this time, as it relates to COVID, we have not laid off or furloughed in a single employee. So we have done everything in our power to keep our employees whole. And what the pandemic pay program is really about is keeping our employees whole as it relates to their income. So if an employee, at a time when our volume was not what it once was, we were able to give them 70% of their base pay, so we could avoid laying that employee off. So to date, as a company, we have not employed or laid off a single employee due to anything related to COVID, and we plan to continue that, and our employees are forever grateful for that. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you, Trey. I know I speak for all of us in this room when we thank all of our healthcare heroes for all of the work that they've been doing to keep us safe. Now I'd also like to recognize our silver sponsor, who is AT&T this morning. They are participating virtually today and have sent us this video message about their first responders network called FirstNet.
During an emergency, a network becomes a critical line of communication, connecting first responders to technology and to each other. FirstNet is the only officially authorized, highly secure wireless network without throttling or the clutter of commercial traffic. Built with and for first responders. It's the help you need to help the people who need you.
We also have some other valued sponsors who help make this program possible. We want to thank Seminole County Economic Development. We want to thank Gray Robinson, the Orlando Law Group, Highland, Duke Energy, Wharton Smith, CPH, and Deloitte. We greatly appreciate their support. Now, at this time, I would like to bring to the stage our Seminole County Chamber Board Chair, Rachel Cobb, for a few words.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone in person and on Zoom as well. So we have a little surprise, and we're going to go off script a little bit today. As our dear friend, Senator David Simmons, turns out of the state Senate this year, we want to be certain to take a few moments to show our appreciation for his service. Over the past 2 decades, David has served as a member of the Florida Legislature. He has a strong record as a champion for Seminole County and Central Florida on a myriad of issues, including everything from environment to education. And as a few of my fellow government professional friends were just talking about it before this event, he's also the guy you always go to when you have a technical issue that no one else would ever be able to understand, and he was always very helpful. His knowledge, dedication, and tenacity have helped create strong policies that make Central Florida a better place to work, live, start a family, and most importantly, receive an education. To speak more on his exemplary service in education, I welcome the president of Seminole State College, Dr. Georgia Lorenz.
Hello. Well, when Jason Broder asked me if I would recognize Senator Simmons at this event, I jumped at the chance. Senator David Simmons has been such an integral part of the success of Seminole State College and the education and training of this community's workforce for as long as any of us can remember. As I only met David 2 years ago, I reached out to those who know him best for some insights. One of the people I contacted was my predecessor, Dr. Ann McGee, who, as you may know, is quite a storyteller. She mentioned that Senator Simmons always responded to her phone calls, and on many occasions called her late in the evening and on weekends to ask if she could, quote, use some extra money. And of course, the answer is always yes. One of these times, Dr. McGee was at a friend's wedding on a Saturday night at a farm. She was standing in the middle of a cornfield at 9 p.m. and got a call on her cell phone. It was then Representative Simmons asking if she could use an extra $500,000 in the college's operating budget. Yes. 2 years ago, Dr. McGee received another call on a Friday night. It was Senator Simmons who asked if the college could get him a proposal by Sunday for a $2 million grant to fund improvements for the fire training program. He knew the need for first responders and the college's role in filling those much-needed workforce jobs in our region. Having received the proposal, Senator Simmons shepherded the grant through the process and guarded it against the governor's veto. As a result, Seminole State now has 2 new fire training trucks and facility improvements for this valuable program. Senator Simmons has always been the college's champion. He championed securing the matching funds to build our automotive services training facility. Those graduates are now fixing your cars. He championed securing funding for the Center for Economic Development at our Heathrow campus, which houses the Chamber and many of our community partners important to the economic success of this community. He worked tirelessly to champion funding for our Altamont Springs campus, where our healthcare programs train the future nurses, respiratory therapists, and other healthcare workers. In 2010, when the most recent redistricting took place and our legislative representation was reduced, Senator Simmons became our sole representative to carry everything through the Senate for the college. Operating money, facilities money, everything. He championed securing the fund for our E. Ann McGee Student Center, which opened in January 2018. This made it possible to locate all services departments in one building for the first time in 50 years. He's also worked this past decade securing money for the renovation of our 40-year-old L building, securing money which will now help us house classrooms and our Academic Success Center for tutoring. That funding took almost 10 years and just wrapped up. Senator Simmons has always kept Seminole State College and the education and training of this community's workforce at the top of his mind. But it wasn't just education where Senator Simmons was a champion for our community. He's been recognized throughout his legislative career by almost every sector that government touches. He was named a Legislator of the Year from organizations like the Florida Medical Society, the Florida Restaurant Association, the Florida Sheriff's Association, the Central Florida Hotel and Lodging Association, and notably Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Senator Simmons' reach was always broad and substantive in his support for the improvement of our community. The strides that have been made in Seminole County and in Florida in this last 20 years of your service is undeniable, and your mark will fortunately be felt for many years. We will miss your unwavering support and vision for education in our community and your steady hand in policymaking, and we wish you well on your next adventure, whatever that might be. It's my sincere pleasure to present this award to Senator David Simmons on behalf of the Seminole County Chamber in recognition of your 2 decades of exemplary legislative service to the business community and our citizens. Would you please join me on stage?
Georgia, thank you so much, and you do such a wonderful service for our community and for all of the students of Seminole State. I'm humbled, and I am and so honored to receive this award, and surprised too. But thank you all. I love you all, and it's a wonderful, wonderful award. Thank you.
Having worked with Senator Simmons for a number of years, I can echo everything that Georgia was saying. He is a fantastic, fantastic elected official, and the Senate will miss you dearly. Now we're going to take a little break for lunch. Please enjoy our lunch today, and we'll be back with the program very shortly. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started back with the program. I'm Robert Stewart with the Gray Robinson Law Firm. We are thrilled to be a sponsor here today, and it's my honor to MC the program, or to moderate the program that we have with our 3 members of the Florida Legislature. Please continue enjoying your lunch. We will work right through that today, and let me start by saying a special thank you to the Seminole Chamber, to the Marriott. Never would I have thought that a banquet-style chicken lunch would have felt so normal and so reassuring. So thank you for putting on the event, and my compliments to the chef. Before we get started, not everybody that we invited today from the delegation was able to join us, and we do have a special video welcome and remarks from Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy, who is in Washington this week, so we'll play that, and then we'll welcome up our special guests.
Hi, it's Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy. Thank you to the Seminole County Chamber for having me here today. I'm sorry we couldn't meet in person this year, but I appreciate the opportunity to provide you with an update on the COVID-19 federal response. COVID-19 is first and foremost a public health crisis, but it's also spawned an economic crisis as a broad range of businesses have been forced to shutter or dramatically scale back operations. Many businesses that just 6 months ago were thriving or at least surviving now stand on the brink of disaster. Families that held stable jobs and earned stable incomes now confront the prospect of unemployment for the foreseeable future. And on a personal level, all of us are deeply worried about protecting our loved ones, like our beloved elderly parents or family members with pre-existing conditions, who are more likely to suffer serious health effects from the illness. We are a nation deeply committed to the principle of personal freedom. It's part of our national soul. It's one of the reasons I love this country so much. But right now, I realize we are all making some personal sacrifices for the common good. To put things simply, the health crisis has triggered a profound economic crisis that will not get better until people feel safe to engage in our community and engage with our businesses. Because our state depends heavily on tourism and high-touch and large crowd experiences, we are acutely aware of how COVID-19 will impact our community and economy for the foreseeable future. I want to take a moment to share what my staff and I have been working on throughout this crisis, both locally and in Washington. My office hears from constituents every day who are struggling to pay the bills and put food on the table. Many of them are local business owners who are finding it extremely difficult to stay afloat and keep workers on their payrolls during this time. And in addition to the thousands who have phoned in, my team has personally assisted over 550 people who have reached out in need of guidance on how to overcome the major hurdles to accessing small business relief, unemployment insurance, and economic impact payments. I've also hosted numerous town halls, listening sessions, and webinars to try to keep the public as informed as possible. My first was in mid-February alongside public health experts before there was a single case of COVID in Florida. And another event offered a direct line to the SBA during those tense days and weeks following the creation of the PPE and the EIDL programs for small businesses. I've spoken to frontline health professionals who don't have access to PPE, and most recently to our local educators who are understandably concerned for their health and the ability to do their jobs. Every day, Americans, private sector businesses, and elected officials must work in lockstep in order to share accurate public health information that will help save lives and ultimately quell the spread of the virus that will allow our economy to fully recover. To date, Congress has passed 4 major bipartisan bills, including the CARES Act and a 4th interim package. The size of and speed with which these bills moved through the legislative process was historic, but our work is far from over. As the pandemic continues with no clear end in sight, the need and the urgency for a 5th bill has only grown. In May, the House passed the HEROES Act, a $3 trillion comprehensive relief package that included an extension of the weekly $600 federal unemployment benefits, rental assistance and mortgage relief, and additional funding for testing, tracing, and the development of treatment and vaccines. Meanwhile, the Senate did absolutely nothing for 2 months, even though COVID was raging across communities in Florida and in other states. In late July, the Senate finally released a proposal called the HEALS Act. They did it so late that we couldn't prevent the unemployment benefit and the prohibitions on evictions from expiring. I think that's legislative malpractice, pure and simple. Ultimately, the Senate failed to move forward its scaled-down relief proposal last week. I've been incredibly frustrated by the lack of urgency to reach a compromise by leaders on both sides of the aisle and by both chambers. Now is not the time for inaction. We must restart bipartisan, bicameral negotiations on a relief package that is commensurate with the scale of this public health and economic crisis. And as co-chair of the Blue Dog Coalition, a group of 27 pragmatic Democrats, I led a letter to the House and Senate leaders saying exactly this. And in that letter, we noted that there are differences between the Senate and the House proposals, but there are a lot of areas of common ground, too, that we can build on. We laid out what the contours of a deal should look like. For example, the deal should include an extension of the federal supplementary unemployment benefit, another round of stimulus checks, measures to keep more workers tethered to their jobs and their employer-sponsored health insurance and off of unemployment. And that includes my proposal to expand the employee retention tax credit, which is in both the House and Senate bills. Also, my bipartisan bill, the Clean Start, Back to Work Act, to provide a tax credit to businesses for hiring cleaners and buying cleaning supplies so they can provide a safe environment for workers and customers. And additional financial support for state and local governments, K-12 schools, and institutions of higher education without attaching unreasonable conditions. Absent fair federal funding, state and local governments will have no choice but to make painful budget cuts to key services like police and fire departments, or to raise taxes for already struggling families and businesses. Additionally, I'm a member of the House Problem Solvers Caucus, a bipartisan group evenly divided between 25 Republicans and 25 Democrats. And earlier this week, we released a COVID relief framework intended to break the deadlock and bring leaders back to the negotiating table. And we'll keep pushing for much-needed bipartisan leadership and cooperation in this moment. Now is not the time for us to retreat to our partisan corners. We cannot let the perfect become the enemy of the good. We have divided government, so principled compromise will be essential. People are hurting, and our economy is suffering, and we need to act, and we need to act now. I'll close by stating an obvious fact. We're all in this together. But I also recognize that we're not all in it in the same way. Rest assured that I will keep urging congressional leadership to work expeditiously across party lines to address this pandemic, and I will keep fighting to provide relief to our families, workers, and businesses. Lives are on the line, and delaying or denying help to Americans is irresponsible. Thank you again for having me. If there's anything my office can do to assist you during this difficult time, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can do so by visiting murphy.house.gov. And please keep doing everything you can to protect yourself, the people you love, and our community. Please stay safe and be well. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Murphy. It's great to have her as a part of the program, even if she couldn't be here in person. With that, let's welcome up our guests. This is a fairly friendly crowd. I think everybody in the room is going to know them. So in order to save time for question and answer during the program, I'm just going to ask them to come up. Senator Simmons, Senator David Simmons, Representative Scott Plakon, and Representative David Smith. Thank you all for being here today. And as they're coming up, I'll sort of throw out the first question. I think we'll start with the obvious, gentlemen, which is how have you handled legislating? How have you handled your role on behalf of the public during this pandemic, during this crisis? What are you hearing from your constituents? What are you hearing from businesses? And what are the things you've kind of spent time focusing on as you've worked through these many months? Senator Simmons, you want to start for us?
Certainly. And thanks for having us. You have a tremendous legislative delegation, and we all thank you for the opportunity to be able to now talk to you in person, which is something that's rather unusual. And so in response, Robert, to what you've said, fortunately, with respect to the constituents with whom I've dealt, my staff has done a tremendous amount of work with respect to the unemployment compensation benefits, spent many hours working with those. Fortunately, and with respect to the opportunity of working with businesses and individuals who are in business trying to keep their business going. I wrote an article, two articles actually, in the Orlando Sentinel, one at the end of March and then the other on April 29th, stating that it is incredibly important for us to get back to work in a responsible way, the way that you're seeing this done right now. You cannot shut down our economy. You cannot shut down the way we live. We can't afford it. The mental health, the other kinds of consequences are far greater than the chances with respect to those who are suffering from coronavirus. And so I know this, that responsible engagement with business and with people together is the solution to this, and that is what I have spent a lot of time, particularly dealing with the Senate leadership. Fortunate to be part of the Senate leadership team, and that is something that we have continued to push in a strong fashion.
Thank you. Thank you. Representative Plakon?
Well, thanks for having us here again. I think this is my 10th one of these sessions, and it just occurred to me, I was telling Robert at the beginning of this, normally they're earlier in the spring, and now we're right in the heat of the election stuff. So it occurred to me, you know, we have opposing campaigns. They send people to take videos and pictures of you for the other campaigns. So if you're a tracker from one of the campaigns and you're here today, I'd like to stand and recognize you. No takers on that one. Anyway, you know, this has profoundly impacted all of us in many ways. My family has been directly impacted. My brother had COVID, and he's about my age, and he's fine now. And my daughter Jeannie is a nurse at an ICU trauma unit in Lakeland, and the way she described it, a respirator blew up in her face, and she contracted COVID, and her doctor husband and my new grandson Gabe, whose 1-year birthday is tomorrow, she had to spend almost 2 weeks away from her baby, and she's in the front lines working today to help people with this. In our area and in our district, of course, we were all shocked at the end of last session, the last week or so, it became apparent this was a real problem. Some members couldn't even come up to vote on the budget, and they were sanitizing the House chamber and that kind of thing. But if we only knew what lied ahead going forward and all the destruction and deaths that would come our way in the state. From my office, we immediately, when we got back from session, we decided to send out thousands of letters to what we identified as vulnerable Central Floridians. I made hundreds of phone calls to people we thought were vulnerable. And if you recall, at that time, nobody would even want to go out to someone else's house, or very hesitant. So rather than my staff, they took a lot of the calls and stuff, but my wife Rachel and I, we went out and we delivered hand sanitizer in the early stages, masks. People were calling me, and we don't have this. Food. Ultimately, we ended up working with emergency management on the calls. One lady was in Sanford, no relatives, and couldn't get to Walmart to pick up her medicine, so I stood in line in Walmart with my mask, probably in April, to do that. And one lady called, I said, "What can I help you with?" "I have no toilet paper." So we were able to locate, this is probably in April, we went and dropped it off in her driveway, waved to her. So, and I think most of the elected officials during this time are seeing which ways that they can serve of both parties. So that's what we've been focused on. It's also, though, obviously created some fiscal issues for the state. Now, the good news is, here in Florida, we have a fiscally responsible legislature and government. We have $4 billion in reserves going into this. So yes, this is going to be tough next year. Yes, it's going to be difficult. But if you compare us to states like New York that have double the taxation almost, their budget is twice as ours, so they give free stuff to everybody. They have, some of these states have a real problem here. We will get through this. The economists are saying this may not even have the impact of the Great Recession, which I served during that as well, as did Senator Simmons. So we have experience at being fiscally responsible, and if I recall, going into the Great Recession, we had about $4 billion in reserves too. So in the good times, we haven't given all the money away to everybody that asks for it. We reserved it for a rainy day. Well, we got a heck of a rainy day, and we are well positioned. So we're going to have to go back. There will be cuts. There's no question about it, but not nearly what they could have been. So, and I know that protecting businesses and creating jobs, which is a lot of people in this room, is going to be a primary consideration in the things that we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Smith? Well, it's a pleasure to be with everybody here today, and I won't restate what my colleagues have said, but I can tell you, for the last 6 months, I have been singularly focused with helping constituents, mainly constituents and other folks, Floridians all around the state, with their unemployment claims. I kept doing these Facebook videos and updating people on the coronavirus numbers and what we were doing to reopen the state and the guidance that was coming out from the governor and opportunities for benefits that most people just didn't know what was out there available to them. And I started, you can get one on my table up here if you'd like, but these palm cards that talk about a little bit about me, but it gives my home phone number. And I look right in the camera and tell people, if you have problems with your unemployment claim, you call me at home. I'm going to help you. And we've been able to help 3,500 Seminole County families who couldn't get through the broken unemployment system get those benefits. Because I tell you, when people call you and they're crying because they can't feed their children, you want to help them. And we have. And then people started passing my phone number around all around the state. So I get people calling me, hey, you helped a friend of a friend of a friend, and I'm happy to do it. And we've helped a bunch of folks. But that has been my single mission more than trying to get reelected, but help the people in Seminole County that need help. Because I tell you, when somebody calls you and says, I've worked in Florida for 25 years. I've never needed unemployment. I don't know how the system works. And now that I need it, the system's broken. And I mean, nobody could ever predict a global pandemic putting 2 million Floridians out of work and overwhelm the website. But be that as that may, they needed help and they couldn't get it from the state. So we stepped in and helped them. And we found some back doors to DEO to get them the money that they deserve, that they rate to feed their families. And I've also been active with business leaders who are hiring. And when somebody says, hey, my job may go away, I'm like, okay, we're gonna deal with that. Here's 3 business owners that I know that are hiring right now. Call them. Here's their phone number. You call them and tell them you use my name, and they're looking for people to hire. And I tell you, that's humbling when somebody calls you and said, hey, I got hired today on a new job, thank you. And that makes everything, all the trials and tribulation of elected office worth it when you get that thank you from a constituent. I tell you, the other thing that's been running that COVID that you don't really think about is the ancillary impact. And the one that I've found that have impacted a lot more families in Seminole County than I ever expected was the cancellation of the SAT tests for high school seniors that are trying to qualify for Bright Future scholarships. There's families that need that money, and they're counting on that child having that Bright Futures, and they couldn't take the SATs because they got canceled because of COVID. So lobbying the governor, I won't say lobbying, advocating to the governor's office for changes, which he took him 4 months, but he finally came around to see it our way, and they've extended that date to take the SATs until December, and I don't think there's going to be any high school seniors going to be denied the opportunity to get all of the Bright Futures money that they've worked so hard for. So I've had a hand in that and was happy to do it.
That's great, thank you. And I'll tell you, lobbying's not that bad of a word. It's what I do for a living. No, you're doing great. Let's kind of go to the next phase of the COVID response. And Representative Plakon, we'll start with you. When the legislature reconvenes, whether that's organizational session or special session or looking ahead towards next regular session, what is the role of the legislature in promoting economic recovery, in helping businesses and employees that are still hurting, and maybe more directly, does that or should that include business liability reform in light of the potential increase in lawsuits surrounding COVID? So kind of think through that a little bit and tell me your thoughts on next session.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I think the first thing in front of us is a big budget shortfall that our committee meetings will start meeting, and we'll listen to the various stakeholders, and there's going to have to be significant cuts, because I remember in 2009 and 10 when we did this, it was very, very difficult in having to choose priorities. And a lot of the things are in the budget now because we liked them in there. They thought they were good to have in there. Well, some of them will not be able to be maintained, and some of them will be cut. Secondly, on policy issues, obviously we have a big problem with our train wreck of unemployment software, which strangely enough was written by Deloitte. And how that turned into such a train wreck, it's a real puzzle. So that's got to be addressed, and I'm sure the legislature will have a role in that. But there's also some policy issues that became apparent with the unemployment crisis when it got stress tested during this pandemic. And this is one thing that I found out in 2011 when we authorized the Department of Economic Opportunity, DEO, created it actually, which had this website and all, the kind of new approach to unemployment, that I was surprised to find out that the metric, we put in a sliding scale with unemployment where if unemployment is less than 5%, you're only can get 12 weeks unemployment. Because let's face it, at 2.8 where we were before, everybody has a job, and I'm sure some of your employers here were having a hard time keeping people with 2.8% unemployment. So there's no need for 26 weeks if there's 2.8% unemployment. If it's over 10% employment, though, we put up to 23 weeks. So this sliding scale, I think, is a good idea. The problem with this is that it uses a metric from months ago to establish today's number of weeks. So I plan on advocating to get as real time we can. So unfortunately, during this crisis, that unemployment is, 20, I think it was over 20% at one point, that we're still using the other metric. So I think that's critical we get that right. Now, at the time, it seemed reasonable because in the last 100 years, unemployment would go up and down over a period of years and it would slowly move. So you could use a past indicator and it wouldn't matter a whole lot. Well, now we know, and we can prepare better for that. So I think you're going to look for ways for the legislature to do whatever we can to make it easier on businesses to hire. So whether it's legal reform like we're talking about, or any other ways of maybe, say, deregulation. As we know, the governor and Secretary Beshears are all in, as is most of the legislature, on deregulating where we can. So we have to, right now we have a business environment that's very difficult. People are staying in their homes, and we have very few foreign people coming in. So I think a focus will be enhancing our business environment the best we can, so that job creators will want to move back in here and get us back to 2.8% unemployment.
Thanks. Senator, we know you won't be there next session, at least not in the role that you have been for the last 10 years. But if you could give advice to the legislature for next year, what should they be doing to respond to this from a policy perspective to get Florida's businesses back on track?
Just a couple of days ago, the federal court in the Western District of Pennsylvania entered a 66-page ruling talking about the unprecedented intrusion of government into the businesses and the lives of people, the citizens of this state and of that state, and of course the United States. And I believe that the proper advice to give is that there is a reasonable amount of regulation that can be done. This is not a case of everything's off and everybody goes home and shuts down and destroys our economy, because he's also found that doesn't work. And then, so it's not shut it down, and that's not just leave it running without any regulation whatsoever. During this time period, I believe that face masks should be worn just as they're being worn, other than when we're eating, and of course, at least 6 feet apart. And common sense is what is going to dictate the proper way for us to get back to business, because the best business is a strong business and a full employed economy. And we need to do that, and we don't need to shut everything down. I've been a strong advocate against shutting everything down. I'm a strong advocate in reasonable regulation, that following the precedent that other nations have had that have gone through this before. And when I wrote my articles that now simply have come true and proved that you do need to wear a mask, you need to take a temperature. There are things that are reasonable that can be done that will cause business to come back, not at least right now, the way it was previously, but that'd be the advice that I would give. And I can tell you that has been proven to be that which works. Same thing happened in, say, Hong Kong. They've had the SARS virus that occurred, which is a corona type of virus. When that happened, they've learned to use, and that's 7.5 million people within a very, very small area. And they learned how to use face masks. As I've stated, face masks are not perfect, but they certainly are very, very viable and protective. They're not a panacea, but they certainly do a lot towards protecting those who are involved in any kind of relationship that is close. And I think just common sense is the thing. And when we do that, the best antidote to unemployment is a good job. An unemployment check is not what we want to have. It's a good job is what most people want to have. And so I'm a firm believer in that, and that would be the advice I would give.
Very good. Representative Smith, any thoughts on that?
I think it's the liability protection for the business community is a must. There are businessmen that I speak to regularly and women that are making that decision. They've taken the PPP loan to keep their employees on. They've done everything that the state's asked them to do, and now they're in a position that they may have to borrow more money to keep their business going. And they're at that fork in the road. It says, do I leverage? Do I put in more of my own money? Do I keep it going? Or I just call the bank and tell them to come get the keys, and have to deal with it. And if we don't find a way to give them some type of liability protection for the frivolous lawsuits, then some of those businesses are going to say, come take the business, come take the keys, and then we won't have what Senator Simmons just said, is those good jobs. That's what we need. That's how we're going to get the unemployment down, is creating those jobs. So I believe some type of limited liability for the business community in the state of Florida and nationally is a must. I wish the federal Congress would get a move on, because it needs to come top down, and then Florida can follow through with the federal. We've got to have liability protection.
Thanks. A couple more questions we've got. Thank you. There you go. We've got a fan. A couple more questions. I know we've got about 5 or 10 more minutes. Representative Smith has a fun date later today with the Orlando Sentinel, so we don't want you to be late for that.
The flogging starts at 2 o'clock. So
let's talk about something that's going to be on the ballot in November, $15 minimum wage. Give us your thoughts on what impact that can and would, if passed, have on businesses in Seminole County that we ought to all maybe be thinking about as we prepare to vote in November. Who wants to take that first? Representative Plakon, you want to try that one? Sure.
Well, I know that's going to be on the ballot, so we don't have anything directly to do with that. I mean, certainly here in Florida, we want everybody to make over $15 an hour. The challenge with that is that in the areas where this has been tried, it has massive amount of unintended consequences. Fast food restaurants, for example, some of them, their business model just doesn't function at that, and that they find other ways to automate or have to raise prices. So it'll be a game changer on our economy, and I'm not sure it's going to be a great one by mandating businesses. It comes down to the question is, what should decide these things, the free market or the government? So in this case, our Constitution would be requiring a certain amount of pay, and I think there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences to this. I think that businesses, people that start at minimum wage jobs, I don't know if anybody that starts at a minimum wage job and that's their dream, but it's restaurant workers and their teens and others. It's a foot in the door. So a lot of these doors are going to be closed because the $15 will be unaffordable. So they'll have longer hours with other employees, and this is what we've seen in other communities where this has been tried. So at this point, it's up to the voters, and we'll respect their decision. I just have my concerns as to as good of an idea this sounds to be, what the consequences are going to be.
Senator, any thoughts on that?
Certainly, I think it's very problematic because, and if someone understands economics, they understand that when government goes ahead and artificially sets a minimum, what happens is that it does the same thing that when Richard Nixon did the price controls, and there becomes a black market. There becomes a situation in which there is a system in which people who cannot afford to pay $15 an hour, businesses, restaurants, a lot of people who are in business cannot afford to pay, whether it's starting at 10, 11, 12, and works its way to 15. It's an artificial control that is inappropriate. Do I believe in a minimum wage? Absolutely, I believe in a minimum wage, and I believe that it should be strictly enforced and there be a mechanism so that there will be this minimum. But to go ahead over the next 3 to 5 years and set a standard that didn't anticipate the coronavirus, for example, and I know a lot of businesses that just simply can't pay that right now and won't be able to pay it next year or anything else because of the just recoiling from the problems of this. There are a lot of good intentions that go wrong. That is a good intention that clearly will go wrong.
Representative?
It has no business being in our state constitution. I agree with my colleagues, but just on the way things ought to work, it should not be in, the Constitution is the wrong place for a minimum wage.
One final question, and more, I think a more global question for y'all just to kind of think through and give us your thoughts on. Criminal justice reform has been a national and a state topic for several years now, this concept of smart justice, investing more in diversion programs, in reentry programs for folks that are transitioning back out of the system into society, finding a way to reduce the prison population through keeping nonviolent drug offenders out or letting them out. Those are topics that have been discussed a lot nationally. A lot of them have been discussed in Tallahassee, including some stuff that's come out of the Senate. What are your thoughts on that as we kind of are living in this moment nationally and that begins to be more and more talked about, this idea of smart justice? Give us your thoughts about the next years and what we might see in Florida coming out of that. Representative Smith, you want to start?
He's pitching it to me because I have to run. I think one of the things that COVID is going to do this next in the 2021 legislative cycle is knock off track the momentum we had for judicial reform and prison reform. And that's unfortunate because we have, in Florida, we have too many nonviolent first-time offenders in jail at the taxpayer's expense. We can do better as a state. We passed in the 2019 session the first judicial reform issue really in 20 years. So we were making progress. The fact that we have so many, the recidivism rate, we need to look at crime in making an investment and not as an expense. And we can knock down recidivism. I tell you, if you've never had the opportunity to hear Sheriff Dennis Lima speak about just in Seminole County, you really need to, because he's got the facts and figures right here on a local level and really can put some texture to it. But as a state, we've got to do more to divert people from getting into prisons. We've seen it with youthful offender programs at work, veteran court. As most people know, I spent 30 years in the Marine Corps. I was very active in getting veterans court, and now throughout all 67 counties. It's worked as a model here in Seminole for years, and we just finally adopted it statewide. So there's more we can do. We spend and waste too much money on the corrections programs because we view it as an expense and not as an investment. And I think that mindset is different, is changing in the legislature. And I think it's unfortunate that COVID may knock that off for 2021. But I know there's going to be other champions in the legislature in 2022 going forward to make some significant changes. And if I would be remiss if I didn't point out my good friend Shane Lillibridge in the back over there, who helped me put together a group of people that, as I listen to family members that are in prison, and to hear some of the stories of the miscarriages of justice because the system forced them to give them criminal penalties that were just horrendous. That's not justice, it's vengeance. And that's not what we need in the state of Florida.
Sorry. Senator?
I've been a strong advocate of course, making sure that there are stiff sentences for those who are, in fact, the perpetrators of crime. And what I also have been a firm believer in, however, and an advocate of, is to give judges the ability to have the discretion to deviate from those sentences when it is appropriate to do so. I've told a story about a judge I know who she was sentencing a young man for a crime, and she literally had to turn away so that they could not see her cry, because she knew that what was happening is she had no ability to dispense justice. something that we need to permit our judges to do. The solution to this with respect to criminal sentences that are stiff are those that are in fact wrongdoers who have committed the kind of crimes that we all know they should be put away and probably not have an opportunity to get back out, because I don't think they'll ever be rehabilitated. But for those who can and should be given that opportunity, our judges should be given the opportunity to deviate from those sentences so that justice can be dispensed. With that, there needs to be, out of the 100,000 people who are in our criminal justice system in our prisons, those individuals, those who are can be rehabilitated, should be rehabilitated. And we need to pay our prison correctional officers enough so that they can be there and do the right thing to help. And we need to invest in rehabilitation of those. Most of all, you want to keep our prison populations down? Do you know that the average age of a person who is in prison is, or at least their educational level, 6th or 7th grade? You can predict how many people are going to be in prison by how many people are dropping out of school with the education level of the 7th grade. You want to go ahead and take those which are typically, the reason why there is a majority of them are minorities. If you want to go ahead and change our prison population, we change our way we deal with these individuals who are at-risk children, who go to school without having enough food, do not have proper health care, and even every 6 months they're in another school anyway because they're transitory situation with their parents. As we do what I was able to do this last year, 2 years, and that is get dedicated funding so that we would provide wraparound services to those children who are in at-risk schools. You want to change the way that we are dealing with all of this, and it'll have a profound effect, not only on those young children who will be able to compete and who will be educated and will be able to share in the American dream, but you will also be able to take those children and make them not part of our prison population. And if that would happen, I can assure you, and we dedicated $45 million to that this last 2 years. It's now embedded into our FEFP. It is a critical beginning of a long-term solution to a fundamental problem and a way to have success here in our state that will be the way that all of our states should do this. So that's the answer to that.
Well said. Representative, some final thoughts?
Well, criminal justice reform has become more popular in the last few years since the president has taken that on and had some success. I like to say I was for criminal justice reform before criminal justice reform was cool. Since my return to the legislature in 2014, I've had at least one bill, I remember years with multiple bills, addressing criminal justice reform. A few examples come to mind are adult civil citations I filed. So if you're a 20-year-old and you get caught with a 6-pack of beer, you can be diverted before the arrest rather than after the arrest and mugshot. It was modeled after juvenile civil citations we had for a year, and that has ultimately become law. For example, you know these mugshot sites? That 20-year-old that got a mugshot, it's a big scam. Some people own the same ones. They get your picture. You pay them $400 to take it down, and it shows up somewhere else, and that kind of thing. So I passed legislation 2-3 years ago to tee up to make it easier for John Morgan to sue them, for example, or administrative fines and allows the Attorney General to go after him as well. Now, that being said, they're very difficult to get their hands on, but at least this puts them on defense that if there's, some of them are pretty wealthy, there may be an enterprising lawyer out there to come and hunt you down and collect the fees on it, because young people in particular are getting these mugshots in the days of Google. It affects you for the rest of your life for some knucklehead thing you did when you were 20. So I think that's an important thing. I'd like to 2 years ago, I want to say, I did a bill working with the Department of Professional Regulation and the Bureau of Prisons to require the Bureau of Prisons to provide or to allow training for, it was about 20, mostly trades kind of things, where they could get these licenses for these professional regulations while they're still in prison. And it requires the prisons to accommodate that. So when somebody comes out of prison, after say several years, they can get a job as a roofer or a carpenter. And this kind of thing has profound impact because you get out of prison these days, you have no money, and you can go steal again. So this will help with recidivism. It'll help with some of these people not having to go on welfare and food stamps and such, because they'll be able to be gainfully employed the day they walk out of that prison. So that it has public safety because they aren't without money and they can get a job. So now that being said, but at the same time, certain things we have to be tough, and certain serious crimes. I was very proud of the fact that this year I worked with Senator Linda Stewart, Democrat from Orlando, and Representative Tracy Davis from Jacksonville, both Democrats, and as a Republican. By working together, we passed a bill that is now the law to make sex offenses against minors in the state of Florida. There's no more statute of limitations. So it used to be, depending on a bunch of circumstances, there's a matrix of 11 different eventualities in law, and I don't know if these offenders would understand it very easily, of it's 4 to 8 years for this and that and the other thing. It is real simple now. You commit a sex offense against one of our minors, you better be looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life. So that was a big bipartisan effort that we got passed. So we have, yes, certain things need to be reformed, but certain crimes, I can argue that we need to get even tougher on. Recently, I've been on the Judicial Appropriations Committee for, I think, last 5 years, 6 years, I say. So I've become very involved in the prison budgets and working with the Bureau of Prisons. The Secretary, Mark Inch, he's a fellow widower like me. We've kind of bonded, or we've went out to dinner with him a few times and such. So we're talking about other ways that we can make our prison system more effective. He ran the federal prisons before coming to Florida, and he ran the Army prisons internationally before coming to Florida. So this is a really experienced guy, and he's been a reformer since the beginning throughout his various jobs. So I think we'll see some activity start in the prison system too. They have about 100,000 prisoners that they're responsible for, so it's a big responsibility, and it's a big part of our appropriations budget. So I'm sure there's some things we can do better there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, we could go on for much longer with the questions that we have, and if we had time for audience questions. But let me just say a special thank you. Senator Simmons, especially for your decades of service to this community, Representative Plakon, for all of your years of service. I certainly am proud to know you and call you friend, and I know that many in this room feel the same way. So everybody, if you can join me in welcoming and or saying thank you to our panelists. And I will bring Jose back up to close us out. I want the record to reflect that this morning, as we were making final plans for today, I thought Jose and I had made a pact not to wear a tie. Clearly we didn't have a pact. I got bailed on. But it was great to be with you today. Thank you for having me, and let's wrap it up.
Thank you, Robert. And the only reason why I put a tie on was because my wife didn't let me leave the house without it. She said, "What are you doing?" So I'm sorry, my wife won. I tried. Well, thanks again, everybody, for being here. Can't thank you guys enough for your support and for coming out and being here with us in person. And again, everybody on Zoom, we appreciate y'all as well. Please take a look at some of the events that are coming up. We have some fantastic chamber events coming up. The Women's Luncheon is next Thursday, the 24th. And then on October 15th, we have the Seminole County city leaders will be giving us an update with the mayor. And so we're very excited about that as well. And finally, thank you to all of our sponsors once again. Couldn't have done it without you guys: Central Florida Regional Hospital, AT&T, Seminole County Economic Development, Gray Robinson, Robert, thank you. The Orlando Law Group, Highland, Duke Energy, Wharton Smith, CPH, and Deloitte. And also, we want to say thanks to all the guys from 1AV, especially Luis, who helped with all the technical needs for the event and the Zoom feed and all that. So if you ever need some good AV needs, check out the guys over at 1AV. And thank you, Marriott, for hosting us today and for the great lunch. Appreciate everybody coming out, and we will see you soon.